Good morning, everyone. It's nice to meet you. And yeah, I was just hearing the conversations about AI. And yeah, I feel you all. It's just that it's so hard right now with all the things they're doing. So thank you for the workshop. It was very fun. So let me introduce myself. I'm an assistant professor of computer science here at Notre Dame. This is my second year, so I'm just trying to learn how to do this job. But I did my PhD in communication and computer science at Northwestern University years ago. So I'm very excited about just like trying to find the intersection between these two fields, about communication and computer science. So this is part of work that we have developed for the last year and a half. And well, speaking of AI, one main technology has been going around. It's virtual reality, right? So with that was the big hype of the Metaverse. You saw how Facebook rebranded themselves as Meta. And now the questions are like, can this be a tool for scientists? So let me start the presentation with this picture. And probably this is close to home. So basically, when the pandemic hit, we had to work from home, and it changed our lives. But sometimes right now we're seeing like there are so many benefits of just like having this type of work, right? Like we can work from home, we can just accommodate to our needs, we can be anywhere in the world. Now there are people talking about the digital nomads, just like they can be traveling and working from anywhere. And also the flexibility, or you can determine your own schedule. I know that ND research has this interesting space right now. Basically, they're allowing hybrid work, so staff can just work from home, they can be on campus, and this is something like managers, companies are discussing about the consequences. But as you can also relate, it's time, right? Just like Zoom fatigue was something that it was demonstrated by multiple scientists. Basically, after 1 hour or two, people just get super tired. They can't handle being in front of a screen. It's super isolated. People who were alone or just like working from home without any family support, it was just super devastating. As well as just like if you have kids and other families, like that was another challenge too. And if you were in a meeting, probably you recall this kind of images on Zoom, right? Like you see just people having their cameras off and feeling like you're just talking into a wall, or like you're not paying attention because you're just like multitasking, right? So there are different benefits and cons, just like why we can just use these kind of technologies. So we started asking, what about if we consider virtual reality? And I think that was the main motivation from Facebook. It's just like, what if we can enable social relationships that happen across the world, but like rather than using a screen, we can enable like spatial communication, right? So people can just use the headsets or other kinds of technologies, and probably they can just start working together. Like, for example, here, they're trying to develop or design an engine. So it could be a possible solution for scientists. And we see this is very popular right now in other fields, like in construction, because you want to see the blueprint in a large scale. You don't want to see in a tiny screen. You want to see like how this will look like. And this is very important now. In medicine is very important right now, and you see how it's just replacing other techniques for learning, because the students can make a lot of mistakes. So rather than just like making mistakes with real patients, they can just do it with simulations, right? With these agents. So this is more realistic than, for example, having a mannequin in front of them. Learning science is true too. Like, for example, people can just use the power of 3D visualization. So like instead of using, for example, a book or just like a screen, they can see the picture, the model in 3D images. And finally, for military purposes, again, all of these things are related to learning, like how they can provide a more experiential learning opportunity. So this is not kind of nuts, just like it's like we are seeing like this is increasing in other fields. So, but probably if I tell you about VR, maybe you are like, right? Like you don't buy it enough, or like you never tried it. And that's fine. And this is like the current stage of the technology. But now we're seeing more and more like technologies like this. Like different companies are trying to create what it is called like a VR meeting room. And they're trying to enable this, just like people can be in separate rooms or different places in the world, and they can be connected and feel like they are next to each other. So based on this, we ask, can virtual reality help scientific teams collaborate remotely? And I think this is the idea of just like, if this is a tool that can foster communication, especially when science depends so much on that, like collaborations, idea generation, all of that depends on how they collaborate and communicate. And we had this idea, and Nature bought it. So kind of like, and Brett, who's there? Like, I saw you a few. Yeah, thank you. Like, he helped us as just like a lot just to promote this article. We were discussing with my collaborators from Princeton and Northwestern University. We were talking about what are the potential benefits of using Metaverse, or like the technologies of the Metaverse for science. We were discussing things like, as I mentioned, like bringing remote collaboration and providing the physical affordances that are required. Also, it could be a potential tool for experimental design. Things like they cannot happen in real life. Maybe we can simulate them and see them in front of us. And also learning, right? Just like how we can train the next generation of scientists to work together. So Nature published this article 2 years ago. And based on that, we started getting a lot of attention, just like, okay, so this is just like a commentary. So we were just asking a lot of questions, trying to brainstorm some ideas. So now that allows us to start kind of experimenting and trying some interesting ideas here. So a little bit of context, and I can go very quickly through this, but I really want to show you the data. It's just like what it makes me more exciting. So about virtual teams, and every one of you right now are part of a team, right? Like we are part of like a work company, etc., or like your teams like outside of the work, like for example, sport teams, etc. But the idea here is like a virtual team constitutes a group of workers that usually they are located in different regions or places, and they're working together using these technologies. And you can recall like years ago it was mostly like in order to enable people who were in different cities or different countries working together. But now, because of the pandemic, and also because right now we have tools like this. Right now we have our phones, right? So we can just chat our coworkers or like our managers, just like sending messages. We don't need to be necessarily in the office. So we are trying to ask just like, as these technologies are being more pervasive, just like how we can adapt this current state of the art, how we can extend it. So a concept here has been virtualness. Just like right now you can see that it's not so black and white. Like it's not like you work online or offline. You have something in the middle, right? Even if you work in an office, a lot of work has been in a server, right? In a cloud server. So you're working on Word, like you're working on emails, so it's like doing a lot of things, and everything is in a computer. So in that sense, we're trying to see how much of that virtualness can be captured by virtuality. And you see a little bit like from all your experiences, like basically there are differences of working together in person or working in virtual teams. There was also an article in Science, in Nature, a few months ago. They were talking about remote teams have harder time just to create more ideas. So when people are together, like they're close, they're in the same building, the same campus, they benefit just like creating more disruptive ideas. So kind of the advice there is like, if you are working together in person, maybe then you can start moving out and just like start working together but remotely. So very interesting results, and I think science has been done like great effort to understand how these communication processes happen. So, and yeah, like we're trying to take that lead. So you can see pictures here, like either you use Slack or Microsoft Teams, or right now everyone uses Zoom, right? So just like we're right now trying to put this into our toolkits of digital and communication technologies. And another theory that we're trying to capture here is, this is called the medium, the richness theory. So basically, I don't know if you can see clearly the screen, but the thing here is that we have different mediums to communicate with each other. We can talk face-to-face, which is the most rich. Like, I can see your face, I can see your expressions, I can see your body. The less effective ones, or just like the ones that transmit less information, is usually documents, right? Emails, like very short things, just like they don't have any context. How many of you have seen an email and they don't understand the tone? Like, are they yelling me or they are trying to be nice with me, right? It's just very often. So in that sense, we have different technologies, and as we provide more cues, right? Like body expression, language, body language, that communication can be more expedite, and also can be more transparent. So the idea here is to see if, for example, the use of these technologies that are close or similar to face-to-face can enable that process of collaboration. So that's the opportunity that many people see, as scientists see with virtuality. Like the main thing here, and why I'm just selling, I don't want to be an evangelist. Personally, I don't use VR a lot, but like I think there are two main capabilities. One is immersion. You're immersed in a specific space, right? Like you are disconnected from your own reality. And that's something very powerful because as a scientist, it can bring you to, for example, to experiment. It can bring you to a specific research field. So that's very important just to start extrapolating and see how that can be useful for conducted experiments or just like for discussing ideas using 3D visualization. And the other part is trying to enable all these cues that in-person meetings have, right? But we cannot use in Zoom, right? Like using Zoom, I'm sorry. So imagine like I want to use my hands on Zoom and just like, yeah, I can just like put my hands in front of the screen, but then you're just like using this tiny screen. How many of you have been taking meetings when you're driving or like in the car, right? Because just like you're running from your home to the office and like, oh shoot, I'm running late. So then I have to put the camera there, or just like they see me, but I'm driving. This is the most awkward thing, right? So just like all these kind of random things that happens when you're communicating online. So how that kind of the lovely aspects of just like when you're meeting in person can be captured by these technologies. So a few studies have analyzed how VR can be potentially a space, or at least for collaboration. But the problem right now is just like most of the research is in the context of gaming, learning, and we wanted to expand this to see if this could be a potential tool for work, right? And at Notre Dame here, we have explored this opportunity. Actually, here in this building, the VR lab is here on the 4th floor. It's conducted by Professor Mike Villano. So the idea here is that like, we're trying to use these technologies that are simulating a 3D environment. And then the goal here is like people can immerse themselves and feel like they're physically in the same space, right? And that's something very powerful. Like regardless of where you are, you can be in the same place. So different devices have been developed. Probably you have seen the trailers or the news articles about Apple Vision Pro. I don't know how many of you have tried it. No one of you. Probably no one. OK, Oculus 3. No one. One. OK, 2. You see, it's a very nascent technology. And I encourage you, maybe you can go to the Apple store. Like they can do these demos for you. You only need to make an appointment. But basically, they show you how you can use this technology. It's not so hard. But the question is still, what can I do with this thing? And you have seen the news, just like Apple Vision Pro, like the sales have been going down. So what is the main aspect of this? Here is just like enable social presence. So VR can enable people to be socially present in this shared space. When you're on Zoom, probably you're just seeing a screen, right? But still you are in your room, like maybe your kids around you or your pets, right? Or just like you feel alone in a coffee shop, etc. So the idea here is like if we can enable this social presence, like I feel like I'm connected or I feel like I have these partners around me, right? So this is the idea here to understand to what extent individuals interacting through online technologies feel that they're co-present with each other. And if that helps us to be more creative, to collaborate better, collaborate more, or also trust with each other. And in that sense, this is not a novel idea, to be honest. When in the 90s, a group of researchers of University of Illinois, Chicago, basically they started creating these interfaces. So this is called CAVE. And basically, as you can see, it's just like there's a person, the user, in a room, and it's projecting like this 3D simulation around the walls, on the floor, on the ceiling. And there are a lot of cameras, and the idea here is like this rendering updates according to what the user sees, right? So if you look at on the right, everything changes. So it gives this impression like this person is immersed in this 3D space. Right now, technologies are getting better and better, and just like they're nascent, just like using. But as you can see, it's very expensive, just like to have a room like this. Also, years ago, Lanier, he was at North Carolina. Basically, he started creating this technology. They call it like the teleimmersion. So basically, the idea was just to simulate having your colleagues in front of you in the office. So there were like hundreds of cameras around the person. So the idea is like if you were looking around, the image will render according to your point of view. So if I'm looking at you in front of you, I will see the front of your face. If I'm looking around you, like on the left, on the right, I will just see your cheek, right? Or your part of their shoulder, right? So the idea is trying to provide a more realistic experience, and you can see, like real scale, it's not like seeing a tiny screen. And if that can provide, for example, interacting with 3D objects at the same time. So how we can start testing this? Basically, what we did, it was just like run an experiment, as we scientists do. So we tested this idea of like virtual reality can help or not scientists or like teams work together. So we have 3 conditions here. In one condition, we asked participants from our experiment to be working on this task in the same room. Like we put 2 people in the same room, asked them to work together. Zoom, and we have separate rooms in this lab, so we asked them just be in separate rooms, and then you start working together using Zoom. And the last one, we have virtual reality. So again, 2 different rooms. The users, like participants, were using the headsets, and we asked them if you can work together on this task. The task is very simple, and you can see this is a frisbee. And this is part like, in psychology, it's a very standard task, but this is called the alternative use task. Basically, we're asking them how many things you can do with this frisbee. And you have seen sometimes in this kind of test, it's just like the idea here is that we are like testing 2 main points. One is how many ideas they can create, so idea generation, which is very important for scientists, just like how they came up with ideas. And then we ask them to select the best one. So they need to discuss, in that process of collaboration, they need to agree in which idea they will be the best. So we ask them, write down all the ideas that you have, and then select the best one. And then we evaluated how many of those ideas were created by each condition on average, and also the originality or the novelty of the best idea. So scientific method, we asked participants in their study to arrive at the lab. We did a pre-treatment survey just to evaluate demographics, how familiar they were with VR. We assigned them to a condition, then asked them to work together, and once they were done, we asked them like a bunch of questions related to how was the experience. And I'm going to show you a little bit like the results, and also, of course, like the takeaways. So this is the in-person condition. You can see, and you see all the Notre Dame brand, because basically we're Notre Dame students who were doing this. So there was a specific room, a table. We have 2 cameras so we can record their faces. And they were working together for about 20 minutes. This is the assumed condition. So you see here, there's a computer. There are 2 monitors, one with the spreadsheet so they could write down their ideas, and then the other monitor with the Zoom so they could see each other. And we were recording both of them. And the last one, VR, which, gosh, took us a long time to run this experiment, but like, basically, we were setting up all the environment. You see the computers, the headsets. So we asked the participants at the beginning, create your own avatar. They need to customize their bodies, their face, their clothes. And once they were ready, we put them together in a VR meeting room. This is where we're using Meta Horizon workrooms. And you can see here, the 2 participants were there. One participant was using the keyboard taking notes, and both of them could see this spreadsheet on this wall. So they were like seeing each other, but they were in different rooms. And also we recorded like their point of view. So we were just checking what things we were looking at, and they were paying attention to their partner. This was not an easy study. Basically, we recruited 328 participants. So we have 164 pairs. And you see here, we have 60 pairs who work in person, 50 pairs who work on using Zoom, and 64 working on virtual reality. So based on this, we're trying to compare them and see what are like the statistical differences. So I'm going to give you a big summary of this, just like what you I hope you can take home. First of all, most participants, as well as I can assess here, it's just like they're not familiar with VR. Like we're still very far away just to see, oh, if this is going to revolutionize the industry or like our companies. So many people said they are not familiar. That was the first time running or using a VR headset. Actually, some participants said, this is the best experiment I have ever been, because it's like, oh, you're right, like we're giving you a headset, very cool, right? So And another part here is like what people highlighted is just like supported the social relationships, right? So compared to Zoom, people felt more connected with the partner. And I think that's kind of common sense, right? Like having a person in front of you, even if it was like a 3D simulation, but they felt like they were more connected to that. Like they were able to work better with this person. Participants had communications and they reported like the communications that they had were more similar to what in person would have done. And I think that's also true in the sense of like if you compare VR versus Zoom, Zoom has a lot of like constraints. And last one, and I think this is the main issue, and again, I'm not an evangelist, but like here, most people like complain that VR, it was very hard to use and learn to use. Like usability is like we're measuring how good or how easy it is to use a technology. So they struggle a lot with this. So we have a bunch of items. I want to highlight a few ones, but basically we asked them several questions, such as how mentally demanding was the task? Not very hard, but like you can see, there were not significant differences. It was slightly lower in the case of virtuality. Just to remind you, in person, virtuality is green, Zoom is the blue one. And then we asked them how physically demanding was the task. And you can imagine because they were like using their hands, they're trying to understand how to use the headset. They report like it was very demanding in terms of physical efforts. So yeah, VR demanded a little bit less of mental effort, but significantly physical effort. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. Also, we asked them to stay seated. So even if they didn't have to stand up or use their legs, like they still complained that it was too much for them. We asked them, how successful were you in accomplishing what you were asked to do? So you can see there are not so many big differences, but VR was a little bit higher compared to other ones. People felt more, they were more confident about what they were doing. And we asked them, how hard do you have to work to accomplish that performance? And we didn't see big differences. So basically, VR participants reported feeling more success, reported feeling more success, like they were achieving better things, and reported lower difficulty efforts than the participants in the other conditions. Here's like an interesting one. How hurried or rushed was the pace of the task? Like they feel like they were on pressure. So VR people said no, they didn't feel like that way. Maybe this is explained because they were super excited about the experiment compared to the other two. But how insecure, discouraged, irritated, stressed, or were you? And you can see here the big jump. Just like people in VR, they were very stressful, just like stressed out, because they didn't know what to do. Like they were just putting the headset, just like they were complaining about how to use it. So even if they reported that they were not rushed, but it's still like they were more stressed out. This is something that we're still discussing, but like what I found interesting here is like in terms of the task. In social sciences, there are two types of cohesion. Cohesion is like what brings us together, right? So there are two kinds. Task cohesion is like we're together because of the task. We want to be successful. We want to achieve. Like we want to achieve this contest, right? So we are just working hard just to get that. So you can see here there are not like significant big differences, but VR was just the lowest. So people were not so kind of focused on the task compared to the other conditions. But if we ask them out, if you were together because of your team members, right? So it's just like, I love this team, not because of the task or like because I want to win. It's just because I like hanging out with these people. Like, I will have a beer afterwards, right? Kind of that kind of question. So we asked them this question, and you can see Zoom was just much worse compared to the other two. So VR was much better to bring people together, in a sense, just like connecting them because of their social relationships. So the results here says VR participants were united because of the relationships, while in the Zoom participants were united because of the task. And that makes sense. A little bit like people on the screens are just worried about like what they need to do, and that's it. They don't care too much about who is next to them, and that's kind of the reality. Like we don't see all the screens. But in this case, VR like brings you the people in front of you, and that makes a difference. We asked them also how much connected they felt with the partner. This was much better in VR. How much they trust with each other. No, there were not big, like, significant differences. And we asked them if you will work again with this person in a future task. and it was a slightly higher like scores compared to Zoom. So in that sense, VR people reported like they felt more connected with the partner, and they will work with those again. We're almost done, so we're kind of just trying to show these parts. So we also asked them to what extent they could communicate well with the partner, right? We didn't see big differences, so in that sense, in person, of course, it's much better to communicate, but you can see there were not big differences between doing this on Zoom or like in VR. And this is something, conversation coordination, and this is the main problem with Zoom. As you can see, two people cannot talk at the same time, right? If two people talk at the same time on Zoom, it just like gets noisy, and people don't understand what you're saying. So people on Zoom need to be more aware like when they need to talk. That doesn't happen in person because I can just like direct my conversation to someone, right? And it's still those two people can continue chatting. So in that sense, VR, it seems, is in the middle. And in that sense, VR participants have more natural and similar conversations compared to VR, right? Sorry, on Zoom. The last two, or last three, I think, we asked them if the environment support them working with this partner. And you can see here, of course, if we are in person, it's much better. But then there's a big difference between what comes next, like in VR and Zoom. It was much better VR than Zoom. And when we asked them if the environment and the room support them, like if the room was just like enough for you just like to work together, this was like a little difference. So they felt more connected, like the environment helped them to work better with the partner. But in this case, the room that we had was not enough to work for this task. So we're trying to see here, in that sense, if VR, it's mostly, we need to focus more on like the connections rather than, for example, if you have a beautiful room simulated in this virtual reality. The last one, as I was mentioning in the beginning, you can see here, like the big gap. People complain a lot about disability. Like they felt like it was very hard to learn, it was very hard to use, and in that sense, actually people were complaining about the glasses. People who have glasses imagine like this is pressing on their head, so that was something that we need to work on. Okay, this is the most interesting slide, I think. The one here is like we're showing the number of ideas, okay? If we compare on average how many ideas each participants in each condition created, and basically you can see VR participants created fewer ideas. That was the lowest number. So on average, the teams in person created about 39.9 ideas. VR created 34. And the teams on Zoom, they created 39. So it's just like a big difference. They created fewer ideas. But if we evaluate the originality of the best idea, we found that there are no big differences. So what is interesting here is like people in VR probably didn't create a lot of ideas, but those ideas were still good as the other ones like they created. So there was no big difference. In that sense, probably people could be more efficient, people were more focused, or just like the ideas that were created, they were enough, just like to compete against the other two conditions. And if we do, this is an interaction plot. So basically what we're trying to do here is to compare based on that. Well, as I said, if the environment support them to work with the partner, right? If the environment give me enough tools or allow me to work with this person, we wanted to compare those people who complained that the environment was not good enough versus those who reported, yes, it was good enough for me to work with this person. How different were the number of ideas? And you can see here that although in in person and Zoom, there were no big differences because the environment's very simple. But in VR, the people who felt comfortable using VR created much, much more ideas. On average, you can see here, like almost 38 ideas versus 33. So in that sense, just making the environmental application more useful or more more supportive, that helped people just to create more ideas. And also, we found those who also felt very comfortable working with the partner in that, like using VR, also they created more original ideas, which is what we're trying to expect. So if people have enough training and understanding and they see that the environment can help it to work together, that is like what it will unleash, just like this capability of just using VR. We did some linear regressions, but basically we compared different, I don't want to go through this, but basically we found the statistical evidence, just like VR was much better than in person. in terms of team effectiveness, just like people felt more confident about what they were doing. Also, they felt more connected with the partner, and that was something very interesting, rather than just like, oh, if you have this person, like this person in front of you in the same room, probably they will have not felt so connected compared to using virtual reality. So with that, I want to kind of start wrapping up here. I will show you some of the interviews, some of the results that because we asked them like later, just like, what do you think? So the advantages of using VR. So the big two is just that they said they were feeling socially together, even though they were at different places. And this is the idea of like the social presence. And also the environment allowed them to be more creative. So this is a quote. So for example, first one participant said, I could see the lab assistant, my partner, and the Excel sheet all at the same time. I felt like I was in the same room as my partner, even though we were not. Someone said, it allowed me to feel like I was in the room with my partner. They were in different rooms, remember? So, and also someone said, it was entertaining and eliminated all the distractions. I couldn't not check or watch my phone. And this is the other thing. On Zoom, like whatever, or even in person, you can get distracted very quickly, right? Like you use your phone, like, okay, start multitasking. VR, like how it is right now, it doesn't allow that. You cannot multitask at the same time. So either you are focused on the partner or like you're just wandering around the room. So in that sense, it helped them just like to be more focused. Also, they said the ease of meeting face-to-face will definitely be the most significant advantage of working in this environment. I really felt as if I was in the room with my partner, despite being in separate rooms physically. And you can see here, like the quotes are consistent. The room itself was really cool, and the vibrant environment helped me to be more creative. Using the environment around me to generate ideas. It was really cool seeing the person in front of me, hearing them clearly, but not having to have them right in front of me in the actual reality, right? After COVID, this is particularly useful. And the last one, easy to communicate when participants are not in the same room. You get to customize yourself. People can change, actually some of the participants changed their gender. Like they were female in the room, but they changed to male and vice versa. So we didn't want to ask anything, so it was interesting to see that. But the problems, obstacles, the headset, right? And I think this is something like we will expect things will get better, like the technology will get better. And this is the main issue. It's just a connection with the real world. As well as just like the novelty effect. Many people were not used to this, so like they were trying to understand what to do, and of course they were super excited. It's like, oh wow, I'm in another universe, kind of that, right? So some quotes here. It was more difficult to type and maybe harder to convey emotions or facial expression. And this is because of the avatars, right? They're very cartoonish. It's just like you're seeing a character. And they don't, at least this technology, we didn't track eyes or face or like the mouth. So some of the most recent ones can simulate the eye gaze. So if you're looking up, like it will render that. If you're opening your mouth, if you're laughing, that will be done too. But this one, at least for this experiment, we didn't include it. The most significant obstacles were initially getting used to the system and my hands' control, as well as getting distracted by the virtual environment around me. I like this one because it's a good example. It was hard to stay focused and in the present because I had two realities going on, right? Like it's just like whatever is happening in the simulation and also what is in front of you. People were hitting the desktop, like the table so many times because they were like very comfortable, and then they were just moving themselves, and then they hit the computer, they hit the keyboard, so that was very hard to control. It was a bit tough on the eyes. I could not be in the virtual reality for more than 1 hour or so. The head was painful, and hurt my eyes a bit and got heavy. I wanted to move my chair, stretch my legs, and I could not because I could not see what was around me, so I might have hit something in the real world. How to read nonverbal communication, blurry image for people with and without glasses, and doesn't line up with the real world. And the last one, it was sometimes difficult to be in the simulation because I couldn't look at the real world around me. So just to conclude, and again, I want to open up the room for discussions or questions, and also you can criticize me, of course, if you don't believe on this. But I wanted to conclude, basically what we found here is that VR was much better supporting social relationships or social interactions compared with Zoom. And I think this makes sense, like In Zoom right now, it's very stressful. Like you have multiple screens. It's very hard to interact with someone in a screen. So just the idea of like being immersed in the same space, like you're sharing the space with someone else, makes a huge difference. And if that helps people just like to create more original ideas or just like how they can establish more connections, that will be interesting to explore in the future. This result suggests that VR can support team building among remote workers. So as I was mentioning at the beginning, for people who are just working online, it's very hard just to feel connected. And you have seen like in the news, they're talking about this proximity bias. So people who are not in the office, they feel very far away or like apart from the rest of the team who is actually working in the office. So in that sense, maybe this could be a technology that companies, organizations can use to build teams. It's like everyone is in a remote virtual space, but then they can start like building those relationships. And then they can start switching to, for example, other technologies such as Zoom, emails, Slack, etc. Wizards we found helpful, VR helpful for collaborating the partners, and we can see that they perform much better when VR was good for them. And as I mentioned, the devices continue to be challenging. Every time someone asks me if I think we are there, I think we are not there yet. And that's what we need to see from these companies, what they can create. And the last one, future work, at least from our group, we want to see more complex tasks. And then trying to see if this can be a potential tool. For example, if we can simulate not virtual reality, so you have two realities going on. It's just like if you can have the headset and you can just see your partners or your colleagues around you, but you are still in the room. So you can see your office, you can see your tools, but you can see the people around you. So with that, and I think I'm too early, but like I want to thank our sponsors, Amazon, Research Awards, and Alfred Sloan Foundation. And of course, our collaborators, Professor Dachun Wang, Northwestern, Peter Schiffer from Princeton, Professor Mike Villano and Tim Harvard, who work here at Notre. Thank you. I know that there are 20 minutes, right? So yeah, I think either if you have questions, otherwise we can have our early coffee break. Okay. Thank you so much. Question?
So I have a few methodology questions.
Mm-hmm.
So particularly around the participants, do you have any other demographical information, like the split between male and female? Were they all students? How were they recruited? Kind of that process.
We have students. We measure race, age. Age was very similar because they were all mostly Notre Dame students. We also have Northwestern students, but they will specifically in a specific context in the sense of educational background. Yeah. I think that future step will be if we can do this, but in a company or organization that it will be more realistic, right? And I think that's where we're trying to find a partner or a company who would like to try out this.
Yeah, and I would think for the VR case, having some level of training
Mm-hmm.
before to see what those differences are, since usability seemed to be the biggest hindrance.
Right.
And then for the quantitative results you showed, what was the scale for those? Was it out of 6?
Oh, they were around 1 to 5 Likert scales.
But the total scale, the averages seem to be different for each of them. So
some
if they were
scales
rating them out of like a agree to disagree for
right,
these
like
ones.
some of those are, this is just, some of those are 1 to 5. I know that there are some scales that are 1 to 7. So depends because we are using the original scale from the citation. But yeah. But yeah, usually 4. The top was 5, and also there's another thing here, like probably I need to fix this plots, but just like starts with 0 instead of 1. Right. Thank you. Oops.
Hi, I'm also wondering, I think that this is fascinating, and I like the idea of thinking about doing it with a company, because what are your thoughts when people were uncomfortable? These were mostly students, right?
Yeah.
So how far along are these VR headsets coming along? Are they being produced pretty quickly, or are they stalled a little bit? Because it's just not something, it's something that I see sort of on TV, but not in reality. That's
a good question. So I agree, like in the sense, even I was surprised. I thought with the students, and I thought like maybe there is a advantage in terms of their age, but it's still like 10% of the students said like they have been using at least once VR. Every time it's like, this is my first time using this thing. So I know in industry it's a little bit worse, and I think there are too many explanations. One is the cost. So for example, you have seen the Apple Vision Pro, it's $3,500, and then you need to purchase the lenses if you use glasses. You cannot use your glasses for that. So that means around $4,000 just for one single device. If we scale that, even in small office, 20 people, it's impossible, right? The other thing is that there are no applications right now. So even if you try, and this is what is happening right now, people buy the device, whatever, they're excited, they use it for 1 hour, and they're like, okay, so what? So now what can I do, right? And it's just like, because you can play a video game, you could just see your images in a panoramic perspective, but there are no solutions in the sense like, still like Apple Vision Pro doesn't have what they promoted as like a FaceTime. Are you familiar with FaceTime? It's just like the video call technology they have, but they want to have that in using the Vision Pros. It's still not out there. So I think that's the main issue. Just like people are purchasing this and they don't know what to do, but it's not their fault. It's just like the ecosystem is not yet there ready. So I think kind of my personal motivation is like, if we can try to figure out what are the things that must happen in order just like to trigger that. So it's like, oh, we found that maybe for short activities, like building a team is much better. So like that should be one application. But if you're going to write an email using VR, I don't buy that for at all. And I think you can see most of the videos just like they're trying to say, oh, you can have like 3 monitors at the same time in front of you. But I don't think that's something very useful. Yeah, thank you.
Really interesting. Just curious, when it came to COVID, a lot of people discussing on Zoom that they didn't have to get dressed for work anymore, that they could just kind of walk in and do these meetings. One of the aspects that changes with VR is the avatar. Can you talk a little bit more about the comfort level that people felt that they now had control over their avatar, and just how comfortable they were, confident that socially they could control how they look, how they felt to their partner?
Excellent question. So yeah, that was something like we discovered just by looking and see what the participants were doing. So first of all, many participants said that they were comfortable with Avatar because they could customize as they wanted. It's just like they could change the color scheme, they could change the clothes, they can change the body. Many people just replicate themselves, like they're trying to find the best replica of themselves. But I saw some students who, like they were changing gender, like they were doing things, like they were putting like long hair, but they were like short hair. So in that sense, I feel like they have more control because it's not just turning off the cameras while you have in Zoom, and that's it. Like you're giving the example of the pajama, right? Just like, I'm in pajamas on Zoom. So people, I remember one of my friends who was working at Santa Barbara, at UC Santa Barbara. Like, that university is in front of the beach. So people were just going to like on the beach coming back for their classes. So everyone on Zoom was just kind of like, you see their naked torso, right? But because just like people don't have the norms right now. But here, like with VR, kind of like people feel like more control of their bodies. The only thing that was a dissonance, like a cognitive dissonance, was the voice. Because let's say I am having this body. This is doesn't match it with my my identity, my reality. So they start hearing, and then of course, like every one of us have their own biases. It's just like hear the voice, we'll hear an accent. This is a female's voice or a male's voice. It's just like when that doesn't match with the avatar, the people start like asking more questions, right? And I think that's something that I have seen some experiments, like they're trying to change the voice, so trying to alter the voice just to match it with the body, but I don't know too much. It's like that makes a more realistic experience. So. The bottom line, I feel like, people felt more comfortable choosing compared to just turning off the screen. But the voice was something like this still is out of their control. Like they cannot change the tune, the voice. I cannot really use my accent. Like I have an accent, right? So just like, I wish the technology could do that, but right now we don't have it. Yeah.
Hi. I was wondering, so I know that probably it was very difficult to get the high number of subjects, but for the ones you had pointed out as different, were those all statistically significant? And if they're not, what does just the data that was significant show?
Great question. So if I understood correctly, you're asking me about which scales were statistically significant?
Yeah, like which of the data points were?
Yeah, I'm still like struggling with how I can show those bars and like you can show the p-values. But basically, what was statistically significant? Of course, usability, the number of ideas. So like VR people perform worse than the other ones, but the ones that they, if I'm not mistaken, team effectiveness, like people felt confident what they're doing, that was statistically significant. And also the one about connections, just like feeling connected with the partner, that was also, we ran ANOVAs, just to explain. So we did those and we found statistical differences there. Yeah. Next time I hope I can have the plot like with those bars right now there, yeah?
This is really fascinating technology, and it's really cool. It's just very cool. My question is just from the young people's perspective, and I'm by no means a young person, but I teach college students, 19, 20-year-olds, and I have a couple of teenagers at home, and you're pointing out the social connectedness or the potential for increasing social connectedness with this type of tool. My concern is that this age group, I don't feel like they're interested in being socially connected. And in fact, that's kind of something that we saw with the pandemic. I don't think that was necessarily that the pandemic caused that. I think it revealed that. And something like the slide that you showed with all these black squares on Zoom, we've all seen that, where they don't want to be on camera. And I know that this age group, in general, I'm generalizing,
right.
If they have a choice ordering a burger on an app versus going up to the cashier, they're going to do it on an app. And this is not a novelty for them. This is the reality. And the way that I see them interact is through memes on something like Discord. And they're not necessarily interested in that. They have a different way of socially interacting.
Right.
I feel like we're using that new technology, maybe I'm just throwing that out there, using this new technology to kind of force it to an older model of social interaction in person with body language and seeing face to face. So how do we actually, I guess why are we doing this when people are not really that, or the younger people may not be that interested in it? Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No. I thank you for the point, and I agree in the sense of I see that kind of difference in terms of the next generations. I teach, by the way, HCI, like human-computer interaction here, and I see sometimes for me, it's so shocking right now these days. It's like, when I was young, like people were just chatting in the room, like maybe you're just chatting or sending like these paper messages. People don't do that anymore. Like students do that. It's just like they're there with their phones, right? And they have their own parallel world. Even like things like that, social relationships, dating, just like everything happens in kind of another layer, just like it's out of the reality. So I don't have a kind of a strong suggestion about, maybe VR could be helpful, like, if these kids are not connected in person, like maybe they can connect in VR. What we're trying to see here is just mostly with the question of if we have people working in separate places in the world, right? So just like, the two-body problem, like my partner is in New York, I'm here in South Bend, something like that. So just like, what happens if we can use these technologies just to enable those remote collaborations? So it's like if I'm here in New York, but let's say my research collaborators are Northwestern, how we can emulate that sense of like having a conversation in person. So that's what we're trying to point out. And if in terms of the young people, I don't know because that's the other thing, like I was surprised when I was working on this, Roblox, Minecraft, all these like games right now, just like, the kids are just like socializing and using this. I have seen like birthdays happening on Roblox. Just like the kids want to have a party while they're playing there. So I don't know if VR will be kind of like the next medium. So just like they're playing Roblox, but they're using VR, right? So they can feel like they're in the specific area, but rather than just being in front of a screen, they can be using VR. If that will help them just like to feel more connected or not, I think that will be something interesting to explore. But right now I don't have an answer for what their point. Yeah, and I appreciate the question.
I'm interested why you chose pairs instead of another group size, and how you think your results would change with increasing group size.
Good question. Actually, that's part 2 of this study. We will have a team of size 3. And why we use pairs, it was mostly just for data analysis. I mean, we could recruit faster people if there were 2 rather than 3. We depend a lot on, the main problem in terms of experimental design for us was just like having 2 or 3 people at the same time in the same room, like in our lab. Sometimes people don't show up, and just like counting on like 3 or 4 people just showing up at the same time is just very hard. So we're just trying to do it with 2, so in order to increase the data collection. But yeah, I think how it will change, right now, a lot of happens just like between 2, like they were evaluating a partner, but if they have, for example, a 3rd or 4th member, then it's like those dynamics, for example, leadership will be more evident, right? Like who is the collaborator, like the person who contributes more to the discussion, right? Or like who becomes a leader in the end and can just lead the team effort. So we are doing this this winter, so hopefully it can work out well, but the no-show rate was very high, about 30%. So it was very frustrating for us. Speaking of young people, yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the question. No more questions. All right. Thank you all for your questions and attention, okay? And I will be around if you want to ask me or comment on anything. I look to, again, as I said, we would like to try these kind of instances of experiences, but in a more realistic environment. So if you have any ideas, I will look for those. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.